Please join me in welcoming to the Worcester Economic Club, Mr. David Walker.
Decaffeinated.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. I've not had the opportunity to be in Worcester before. It's a pleasure to be here. I have been in Massachusetts a number of times, spent some time at Cambridge. Let me just say that I'd like to congratulate the city of Worcester for preserving a beautiful structure like this. We just don't make things like this anymore. And all too frequently, you'll find people wanting to tear structures like this down and build something else that, frankly, doesn't compare in any way. I've got two things on my lapel that I'd like to touch on because they're relevant to my talk this evening. The top is a rosette of the Sons of the American Revolution, of which I'm a member. My family came to this country in the 1680s. I have ancestors who fought and died in the American Revolution. But my side of the family is relatively recent comers to this country compared to my wife's, whose father's family came in on the second boat to Jamestown, and who is a distant relative of Ponce de Leon, who discovered Florida. She's also has ancestors who fought and died in the American Revolution. The second is a CPA pen, Certified Public Accountant, which I'm proud to be a CPA. The party tables the CPAs here, I do that. And I appreciate very much you co-sponsoring this event. The combination of being a member of the Sons of the American Revolution and a CPA means I'm a patriot who can add. And we need more of them in Washington, D.C. I've got a number of slides here. Some of them I'm not going to spend much time on. They're all available to you, but I want to save time for Q&A. But let me start with the preamble to the Constitution of the United States, arguably the greatest political document in the history of mankind, the Constitution of the United States. When you look, you'll see that there are certain words that are bolded and underlined. To me, they are the most important words. The first three are by far the most important. We the people. Those are the most powerful words. We the people are responsible and accountable for what does or does not happen in Washington, D.C. Establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty. Those words don't mean the same thing. Promote means encourage. Provide means a more affirmative and significant responsibility. If you look at the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, you'll find that it says that that most of the power in this country are supposed to be reserved to the states and to the people. You wouldn't know that based upon the growth and the size and scope of the federal government over the years. And I would respectfully suggest that if you look at the principles and values under which our country was founded, these are ones that relate to fiscal responsibility, limited but effective government, individual liberty and opportunity, personal responsibility and accountability, rule of law and equal justice under the law, and fiscal responsibility and intergenerational equity. I'm here to tell you we're violating all of these. Every one of these to differing extents at the present point in time. The principles and values that made this country great are being violated. And as a result, our future is at risk. In 1800, the world was a different place, and the position of the United States in the world was a different place, was different. But the federal government was 2% of the U.S. economy. Today, it's 24% of the U.S. economy, headed to 37% by 2040 on autopilot. If you added state and local government would be over 50% of the U.S. economy. I am not an anti-government person. I've run 3 federal agencies, 2 in the executive branch, 1 in the legislature. Some of the brightest, most dedicated people I've ever worked with are in government. But the fact of the matter is, government is not the engine of growth, innovation, and job creation. This cannot be allowed to happen. And if you look at what government is spending money on, in the last 40 years it's changed dramatically. In 1970, 62% of the federal government related to the express and enumerated responsibilities under the Constitution and were controlled. They would deem to be discretionary spending. In the latest year, only 36% of the federal budget related to the express and enumerated responsibilities envisioned by the founders of the Constitution. So it's gone from over 60% to down to 36%, and under the President's budget that was issued on Monday, it would go down to 22% in the next 10 years. So government's getting bigger. What government is doing is less and less what the founders envisioned. More and more is not controlled. Less and less is for investment in the future. And if you look at spending as adjusted for inflation since World War II, that's what the solid part of this graphic is. And if you look at this, you'll see that spending has been on an upward track to the northeast corner, in particularly in the last 10 years. And you'll see that if it's blue down below, it means the Democrats control both houses of Congress. If it's red, the Republicans. If it's mixed, obviously it was split. And if you have good eyes, look at the top, you can see which party controlled the White House. Bottom line, spending is a bipartisan problem. And it's been particularly out of control in the last 10 to 11 years. And if you look at the black dotted line, that's revenues as a percentage. Revenues adjusted for inflation, not as a percentage of the economy, adjusted for inflation. They've gone up as well, but not nearly as fast as spending. And from George Washington, our first president, to William Jefferson Clinton, we accumulated $5.6 trillion in total government debt. And under the last two presidents, George Walker Bush and President Barack Obama, we've gone from $5.6 trillion to now over $15 trillion in adding debt at record rates. And there's only been one other time in the history of the United States the U.S. has had more than 60% of its economy in debt. Not to defeat the British and gain ratification of the U.S. Constitution, not during the War of 1812, not during the Civil War, not during World War I, not during the Great Depression, during World War II. But we got something for World War II. We avoided attack on the continental United States. We defeated the Axis powers. We saved the free world. And after World War II, we were over 50% of the global economy. The dollar was as good as gold. We had 16 people working for every person withdrawing Social Security benefits. We invested in critical infrastructure. We invested in human capital. We brought fiscal discipline back to Washington. And we dramatically reduced debt as a percentage of the economy, but we didn't pay down a dime of debt. Not a dime. Until 1999 and 2000. But now, for the second time in the history of the United States, we're over 60% of debt to GDP. In fact, we're over 100, and we're adding debt at record rates. And one can debate, what are we getting for our current debt burdens? And the real problem is not the debt that you see, and not the deficits that we currently experience, $1.3 trillion. In the latest fiscal year. And this year will be the fourth year in a row that we'll have trillion-dollar-plus deficits. The real problem is what's not on the balance sheet. The off-balance sheet unfunded obligations for Medicare, Social Security, a range of other commitments and contingencies that are multiple times greater than what you see. Medicare, based on reasonable and sustainable assumptions, underfunded $37 trillion. Social Security underfunded $9 trillion. Those don't represent deficits in debt today because we keep our books on a cash basis for the budget. But they will represent deficits in debt tomorrow, absent a change in course. And if a typical household managed its finances like the federal government, here's what they would look like. The median household income in the United States is about $50,000 a year. So that's $966 a week. Spending $1,496 a week, with a deficit of $536 a week, with household debt of $314,000, and total debt and obligations, that commitments have been made of $1.4 billion. I wouldn't want to be head of that household. The truth is, the U.S. government has not had a budget in 3 years, has only passed appropriations bills on a timely basis 4 times in the last 60 years. The last time it did it was 1996. And even when it does pass a budget and appropriations bills in a timely manner, it only controls 34% of spending and declining. Could you run your family that way? Can you run your business that way? The answer is no. We can't run our country that way any longer as well. And if you look at our comparative debt levels, as compared to some of the countries that are in the news in Europe, to do an honest accounting, you have to add federal, state, and local debt as a percentage of the economy. And when you do that, we're worse than some of the countries that are in the news. And when you add what we owe Social Security and Medicare, which is several $trillions, backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government, guaranteed as to principal interest, it will be honored. We're about 2 years away from where Greece was when it had its debt crisis.